I'm speaking in good faith today with Keyvan Guela. She's coming to me from Claremont, California. Keyvan, thank you for making time today.
It's my pleasure.
She's the founder and executive director of the Center for Global Integrated Education, CGIE, a nonprofit Baha'i inspired educational organization. They explore oneness of all humanity. We'll talk about that. Also, she served for 2 years as the producer and host of a 2 hour weekly live radio show for the Persian community in Southern California, focusing on the role of the psychology of spirituality in personal and social transformation. She's originally from Iran. I do want to say that I had read that you left Iran in 1970 and had never been back. And
That's true.
and is that not because of religious considerations?
Oh, definitely. I did not leave because of religious consideration. Maybe I left because I had a global outlook about where the world, how the world is my home, and Iran happens to be my birthplace. But the world, as Baha'u'llah says, is one country and mankind its citizens. So I had the opportunity to come and study in the US and go back and then married and leave. And I just wanted to explore the world, but not going back was definitely because if I would be executed, arrested, executed, because I was part of the cohort of a lot of Baha'is that majority of my friends there were executed. So I was not, my family was not very happy if I would do that.
Wow.
So
I
I
am so
didn't go.
sorry to I'm so sorry to hear about those friends. That is quite a sacrifice they've made.
Yes, yes, yes. They stood up for. I mean, as everybody, all of us, we stand up for our identity, our belief, especially if it has to do with the well-being of the whole humanity. It wasn't a, they were given the choice of denying and saying that they are not Baha'is. They were not willing to do that. So,
Well, I admire them. And
me too. Me
I'm sure
too.
that's a lot of pain and perhaps a full story for another day to know about their stories.
Really, there, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, that's true.
We are talking in a series we're doing now about the love of God, how people feel that, what it inspires them to do once they feel that connection. And maybe I'll ask you about both sides of that, of the mirror. One is, how do you perceive the love of God for you personally? Then I'd love to know how that goes outward from you to other people, because you seem very committed to helping people.
Yeah, well, I'm a marriage family therapist, right? So that's my job. So yeah, as a psychotherapist, I'm always thinking, what way is the right way to help and uplift and support somebody. So I thought about that because this is the first time somebody had asked me that question. So I thought about how did I feel loved by God when I was a little kid, and the thing that keeps coming back to me was the way I was loved by others. Because in the Baha'i concept of love, Baha'u'llah says, "Love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee." This is in the hidden words of Baha'u'llah. Basically, it is my choice. It is my, I need to take the first step to love God. And then the question becomes, how do I love God? And then the question is, how do I feel loved by God? I think probably the most I remember is the way people around me were allowed and encouraged to love each other and then to love me and to there would be no limit to it. My father especially, I think, was probably most significant in that way because he came from a family. His father embraced the Baha'i faith, and then he was killed when my father was the oldest child was 11, and my grandmother had 5 kids, and the youngest one was an infant. So, but I never saw my father being bitter about it. He was very, very devoted and very knowledgeable. In fact, I know that in his youth, he was a teacher in one of the many schools that the Baha'i community created in Iran, and especially the schools for women were first created by the Baha'i community in Iran. My teachers in school were all educated in these schools. It was very interesting. And so my father had this attitude that when I got ready to go to elementary school, he decided I go to a Zoroastrian school. so,
Interesting.
so for elementary school, I was in the Zoroastrian school and also half of high school. And in that school, there were a lot of people from all backgrounds, Muslim, Zoroastrian, and Armenian. And my closest friend was an Armenian girl. So this whole notion of being able to have no limits of who I can love and who can love me and how we relate was, for me, very liberating and almost like revolutionary, because I live in a country where you could not even associate with anybody outside of your faith or outside of your own particular group. It was very, you say, small group oriented or family oriented or tribal mentality, basically. So that to me was, from the very beginning, was liberating. Of course, I was also attending the Baha'i school, Baha'i children classes, on Fridays, which was in somebody's house, and that was interesting. And a teacher would come and teach us about how to be Baha'is, basically how to behave, what is the characters of a Baha'i child, which was very uplifting, like being kind and being generous and being joyful and being curious. The curious part was my most favorite. Basically, ask questions as much as you want, and being part of nature. And my father would plant with me. Every morning he would come into the yard and he would plant with me vegetables and attend to them. And so I learned the love of plants and nature in relation to being God-loving from him. So yeah, the environment that I was raised, very unique in Iran in that time, basically gave me this courage, I guess, to be bold, to be asking questions, to want to know. And to me, that was really knowing and loving. Baha'u'llah says the two purposes we have here, to know and to love. So knowing was very encouraged. And of course, as a result, I felt loved. I say, why shouldn't I? Remember one thing. I remember when first I went to elementary school, they asked, who are the Muslims? And they said, all the kids, majority of them raised their hands. They said, okay, you guys stay here in this class, you're going to study Quran. And then they said, okay, who are the Jews? And then they raised their hand. They said, okay, you guys go into the yard and play. And then they said, who are the Armenians? And then they raised their hand and they said, okay, you guys go into the yard, you play also. Now, who are the Zoroastrians? And a whole bunch of them picked their hand. And so I thought, well, they didn't ask for my name. I said, well, I'm a Baha'i. They said, well, you can choose to go to the Zoroastrian religious learning, or you can go to the Muslim ones. And I thought to myself, I've been learning about the Muslim ones all the time. All the people around me, Baha'is, are always, they're talking about that. I know a lot. So I'm going to go to the Zoroastrian because I don't know anything about that one. So I went, it was in the basement, and I went there and I sat, and the Mubad, the priest, the Zoroastrian priest, started talking in Avesta language, and I could not understand a word he was saying. And I decided, this is not going to be learning for me, I'm out of here. So I couldn't go to the yard to play because that was not the Baha'i choice. So I said I went back to learning Quran, which was fine because as a Baha'i we should learn about all the religions of the past. So I was just fine and attended the Quran classes.
In the
So I
middle
felt
of it,
loved.
I'm glad you felt that.
Yeah, I felt loved. I didn't feel like anything was unloving. I thought this is great. I can ask questions. I can learn. Why not?
I'm wondering about whether it happened as a smaller child or as you were growing, how you developed what might feel like a relationship with God, or when you first realized that God was part of the world and part of your life.
I think my father probably was the initial person because he is a scholarly Baha'i. He's had a very I guess dramatic experience as a Baha'i when his father was killed, and all their possessions were taken. My grandmother, I remember, had to take care of the business of the family, raising the family. But I remember that there was a tablet from Abdul Baha to my family, and assigning a very distinguished Baha'i to take care of the affairs of my grandmother because in Iran, women at that time could not even go outside to shop for themselves. So somebody had to make sure that they take care of her and the 5 children. I
Right?
remember even my aunt later on was older. Her father, her mother had died, and her father was not there, so she could not go and even rent a place by herself, even though she was an adult, because as a woman you would not do that. So my grandmother was taken care of, and to me that was love. That was our family was not left to themselves. So it was all around by the way people would walk in and associate with us. We go to visit them, and then the Baha'i Center was not that far from our house, within walking distance. So I would walk over there with a whole bunch of other kids in the neighborhood. Some of them were Baha'is, and there was swings in there, and then there was little tadpoles in the pool, and we would play with it. There were peacocks all over the place. And as a kid, what do you expect? And there were classes in there. There were people coming and going. I felt very, very safe, and I guess very, very loved.
Well, that's really beautiful that you could extrapolate from the love of the people around you that was God's love coming to you through them.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, the way the Baha'i concept of love, and I continue to learn about it. And the Baha'u'llah says, "Love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee." And so this whole concept of exchange of love of God was through people who manifested His qualities, the qualities of magnanimity, of trust, of nobility, of honesty, of integrity, of love for everybody. My families, some of them were Baha'is and some of them were Muslims, some of them were Jews. It was like, and and so, but we all, when we got together, we all cared for each other, and we discussed matters. We did not shy away from talking about difficult subjects. So to me, it was like, there was no reason for me to feel other ways.
Education is something you've really dedicated your life to, and that is one of the aspects of Baha'i belief is education and knowledge. Why do you think that is? Why is that? Why was that important to come through Baha'u'llah to the
I,
believers?
I think when looking back, I think there are 2 ways to know ourselves. Basically, when we interact with nature, we interact with the living world. That's one way of knowing ourselves. Like you climb a high, steep, mountain, you learn about yourself. You learn, how able you are, how afraid you are,
Yes.
and yeah, and you learn when you're climbing it with others. Are they helpful? Are they attending? Are we laughing? Are we enjoying the scenery? Nature is God's creation, so that's one of the ways we relate to God, through nature. And my father taught me that, and as a result, I'm a very I've been gardening for all my life, and chickens and everything for me. And I love the metaphors in nature that is in the Baha'i writings. And for example, one of the children prayer says, "Oh God, educate these children. These children are the plants of thine orchard, the flowers of thy meadow, the roses of thy garden. Let thy love rain upon them. Let the sun of reality shine upon them with thy love. Let thy breeze refresh them in order that they may grow, develop, and appear in the utmost beauty." To me, this a relationship explains the relationship of education, of me growing, and God. And the rain helps me, the sunshine helps me, the plants help me. I look in every one of them and I see aspects of divine, sacrifice, for example. As Abdul Baha says, he says, there are two ways you do sacrifice. One is the example of the seed. The seed goes into the dirt and it disappears, it dies, but an oak tree comes out as a result. And that is a sacrifice of the seed. But the seed cannot choose to sacrifice itself, right? But human beings do choose. So for us, is a choice. For the nature, is not a choice. And then he said the other example that I always love is the example of iron. Iron loses all its attributes when it goes into fire and becomes fire. It becomes, if it is cold, it becomes hot. If it is dark, it becomes glowing red. And if it is solid, it becomes melted. And I'm always fascinated with this, that in my relationship with God, I'm going to have to give up some things and then change for becoming godlike. So, and the question was, how do I become godlike? And it was, you become, nearness is likeness, as Abdul Baha said. So then we had to Abdul Baha, an example of Abdul Baha, which stories all children learn, how he was in prison, but yet he was always joyful. He was always thinking about the rest of the world. And he said he was never in prison because the only prison is the prison of self. So that was fascinating for me. And that maybe because of that, I became a psychotherapist. Like, how do you get out of the prison of your own self? That kind of it. So learning was, and then I was surrounded by these scholars and people in the community. I remember going to funerals. I love to go to funerals because there was such uplifting conversation going on. It was not sad or anything. And I remember these people, scholars, they come and there's such joy and such energy, and they talked about the soul and the life of the soul. And I thought, great, even death is not going to be my end. So it's just, so I guess the positive was all around. It was just, for me as a child, was no fear, no fear. And because of the example of the people around me.
In the Baha'i faith, there is a special delineation, definition of all of mankind as the children of God, and that there is a unity, that we need to come even to a unity of language as well as faith. You have, it seems, this gift to feel love and to enthusiastically share it with people. Are you ever, I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this without coloring your answer. Maybe you feel, are you ever surprised when you see people of various faiths when it seems like they fail to realize that we are all one?
Well, that was taken care of very early because I remember when I was in high school, that we had a teacher who was wonderful. She was young. She was a Muslim, but a very well-known family, very scholarly family. And she was young, and she just loved to take us to field trips. And she taught us about all these plants, that the properties of these plants. And I was just absolutely in heaven because I love to learn about the world. And so one day she said, one of our friends, the girls in the class who was a Muslim, had lost her mother. And she said, we all need to get together and go and attend the memorial. For me, that was fascinating because as a Baha'i, I had only been to the Baha'i funerals and memorials. And I know it was very joyous and basically it was a place to learn about life after death. And so I was fascinated by that. So I said, okay, I would like to go. So my father never said no for me when I wanted to learn. He was always encouraging, go learn, So I joined the group and we went to this memorial. And from the very beginning, and I entered the room, I was just shocked because she was sitting between a doorway between one side of the house and then the other side of the house. And the first thing I noticed was all the women were one side and all the men were the other side. I was not used to that because when we attended, for example, the Baha'i 19-day feast, there were people from Jewish background who were Baha'is. There were people from Zoroastrian background who were Baha'is. There were people from Muslim background who were Baha'is, and from Christian background, not that many, but they were. So I was used to everybody being together. There was no, separating men and women. So that was the first shock. And then I saw that she was sitting in there, and you could tell she was exhausted. So then so we carefully, politely, without disturbing anything, so we went to the women's side and sat over there. And all of a sudden, this aunt came to the girl and told her, "Why are you so quiet? You're supposed to be warming this gathering of your mother." And I couldn't understand that. I mean, that was not within the language that I knew, warming it. And what does that mean? In Persian, it's gan kar. That means it's just like a musicians who play in a wedding and make everybody excited. She was supposed to do the same thing. I thought, that's really... And then she started wailing and screaming and beating herself. And I thought, oh my goodness, wow, what? I could not understand. I was shocked. So that was, I never forgot that, my memory, in my memory, it's just like always etched. It was so shocking. And then my teacher, after we finished, she took everybody and she took me to her house. So as I entered the house, I saw this big, huge room with a big, huge library in the background. And there was this older man who was sitting behind a big, big, huge desk. Apparently that was her father, was a scholar, very famous scholar. So I was, not young. So I entered in there. And the first thing he asked me, he said, what is your religion? And I said, well, I'm a Baha'i. And then he slapped me really hard on the side of my face. And I was just like, whoa.
Wow.
And I thought, why is he... I could understand in a level that this is the way the Muslims feel threatened by someone who's saying that there is something has come after Islam. Basically, Islam is now the old religion, and now there is another religion, just like all the succession of religions, as a Baha'i understood. All religions are valid, all are from God, but it's like classes of the school. You go through the first class and second class, and that's how it is. But you don't practice the first class if you're in college. You don't practice the stuff in the previous. So, especially the social teachings. So I did not say anything. I was not going to argue with him, and I decided he's not worthy enough. That's what I thought. I thought he's not worthy enough for my generosity of spirit and love to converse with him, because he's an adult, and here it is, he slapped me on the side of the face. just because I don't agree with him. And that was not my experience of not agreeing with other people. You can you can disagree without being disagreeable. But grown up man, he looked very small to me. And I felt sorry for my teacher, who was a very
Ah,
nice teacher. And she had this kind of a father. But that was a norm in Iran for a lot of people who associated outside with the with the Muslim world. And because we had so many examples in the history of the faith, people who were executed, people who were who lost the whole family. So that was not from afar it was unique, but it was the first time I felt it from the close up.
mhm.
Yeah.
You said something earlier that kind of answers a question that I had, uh, just about receiving God's love, and you quoted the scripture that says that if we if we don't love God, that then there's no way that we can receive God's love for us. Am I
Yes.
quoting that roughly?
Yes, actually, yeah, actually, I have reflected on that for very many years, especially as a psychotherapist. You
Well,
know,
that was my question. As a counselor, do you see people who shut out love? I mean,
well,
maybe
yeah,
we all do to in some ways. I would love to feel more of the love of God. How does
I
that work?
do see, I do see a lot, but it starts with shutting other people first.
Hmm.
For example, if you consider a whole class of people because of their religion, because of their race, because of their economic status, if you see them as others, basically you're not being godlike because these are all God's creation. So how in the world can you love His creation if you're putting a wall between yourself and some others? So the first thing, if I want to teach, even in public schools, if I want to teach something about being spiritual, it's about being godlike. Is you need to be able to see the good in everybody. There is a good in everybody. Something is good, and that's what Baha'u'llah says. He says in that the same hidden words. He says, "Hear no evil, see no evil." Basically it's a choice. It's not that there is no evil. It's that you choose not to see it, you choose to see positive. Now I remember my son was 5 years old and I had told him that. And so Abdul Baha says, if somebody has 9 good qualities and 1 bad, just focus on that 9 good one. And then somebody has 9 bad qualities and 1 good, just focus on that 1 good one. He liked that. It gives you a feeling of loved as a child. So one day he was just climbing up the counter in the kitchen, and I come and see him, his hand in the cookie jar, and I go at him like, "You don't know what you're doing. How dare you do that? Who told you to climb up?" And then he climbed down, and he was very calm, and he looked at me, and he said, "Huh, look at you. Didn't you say that if we have 1 good quality and 9 bad, you focus on that 1 good, and here you are focusing on my bad quality? Didn't Abdul Baha say that?" And I said to myself, "Oh my goodness, if I take this Abdul Baha from him right now, if I undermine his saying and make myself right, he would lose his whole faith to the teachings of God about humanity." So I told him, "You're so right, Nason. I'm so sorry." You're so right. I should have.
That's that's very humble of you to be able to do that.
Well, as a parent, you're responsible to bring your children to the truth, right? And I cannot be claiming it and then doing it otherwise. He would not respect me, Just like I respected my father because he lived it. I remember he's coming home when I was 2.5. He's coming home bloody. And I know that this happened in the Persian bazaar because there were all kinds of different people. And because of your being a Baha'i, even being a bit Jewish background, all of that might be the cause of you getting beaten up. But my father was never bitter, and he was never a victim. He was basically, he said people they don't understand, so you just have to make up for the fact that not everybody understands. So we have to understand, and we need to make sure we educate ourselves so we don't become the cause of hurt and agony to other people. Because Baha'u'llah looks so much. He says, beware, beware, lest ye offend anyone. And then he says, beware, beware, lest ye be offended. So it's just
Both sides.
so you take responsibility for not being offended and not offending anyone. So that to me is about really the way we feel love. Otherwise, what is it? I mean, do you expect some force to come and show you, hug you or something like that? I don't think that's how it is. I think it's understanding through science and also through the teachings of the faith that this creation has order in it, and it's governed by certain rules that will never be changed just because you don't believe in it. Like the law of gravity, you know. my father used to do a lot of stories, so he told me the Rumi story. He says, you know, you befriend anybody, you have to know who your friend is. You cannot just befriend everybody. And he told me the story of the bear and the guy who traveled together. So he says the bear comes and tells this guy, are you going to travel far? You seem like. He says, yes. The bear says, you know, would you take me as a friend? I'm big and I'm strong and I know how to take care of you. And the man said, okay, come along. So they were traveling. And halfway, the guy says, well, I'm tired. You know, I really need to take a nap. Would you be wanting to stand by? He said, yeah, the bear said, yeah, I'm going to stand and look after you. Make sure nobody brings any harm to you. So the man said, okay. So he falls asleep. After a while, a fly comes around and buzzes around, and the bear is annoyed the fact that the fly is going to wake up his friend. So he just goes with hand like that, pushing the fly around, and the fly comes back again, as the flies do. And the bear goes around like that. And finally, the bear is not very upset that this fly is bothering his friend, and he wants to protect his friend. And the fly comes and sits right there in the forehead of the friend, and the bear takes this huge boulder, and he was aiming it at the fly right there, and he smashes it to get the fly. Of course, you know, the fly flies around. And my father said, you know, first of all, you need to watch out who you befriend, because not every friend can be trusted. So that's it. He said, but you know, you need to be your own best friend, because actually that bear was not somebody else. That bear was the two selves that Baha'is believe we all have, the Darth Vader and the Luke. He said that time was not a Darth Vader.
Did you just say Darth Vader and Luke?
Yeah, exactly. He didn't say that, but I say that because
the dark side and the light side.
exactly. And so he said that you need to be the light side for yourself, and that is you need to learn, and that comes out of knowledge. And so he would extremely encouraging when I would come to him and I say, oh, I just studied this tablet of Abdul Baha or Baha'u'llah. He would be listening and carefully listening. And then he would say, whoa, this is such an ocean, such an ocean. Just stop right there, because I need to reflect on that. And to me, that was the way for my father express his love. And I love that, the way that he left me with that love of learning. Yeah.
Keyvan, I'm curious, because you have enough life to have been on a faith journey and experienced different stages of life. How is your relationship with God now different than when you were younger, or even 20 years ago or 10 years ago? Has something changed or deepened?
I think the one thing that has become deeper and deeper, I have a lot deeper understanding of the concept that the heart that has fear in it, love cannot be in it. And at the same time, having the fear of God, have a deeper understanding of fear of God. It's not the God that will punish me. It's not the God who's random, and it's not kind of a God that is unpredictable, but it is about his laws. deeper understanding of his laws pertaining to human relationship, pertaining to my relationship with God, and appreciating that there is this universe has a creator, that everything in it is in under its loving shadow. So for me, watching animal shows and wondering about the way the whole creation is created is a lot more appreciated than ever I was when I was young. And of course also appreciation of the sacrifices of the Baha'is of Iran. I don't get mad at it, I don't get upset, I'm in awe. I give you a story. So just a few days ago, one of the Baha'is, a woman, her husband was executed many years ago when her children were young, and she raised them by herself. Then her sons got married, and the daughter-in-law was put in prison, and then she died, and she continued taking care of the grandchildren. And just a week ago, her son, who one of them went to Canada to study mediation and negotiation, so be about peace in Iran, and went back to Iran to serve the community, because the Baha'is in Iran cannot have administrative people who are other parts of the world, the National Spiritual Assembly in the United States or local spiritual assemblies all over the world. They cannot have it. So anyways, so he was in prison again for the second time, the son. So she died. And the practice right now in Iran is they will not allow the Baha'is to be buried like the way we have in our faith, that, the body is need to be revered, clothed in the natural material. I just gave a talk actually on YouTube about from kitchen to grave, what the journey we take. In Persian, of course, that talk is. Anyway, so saying the special prayer for them, there is a special prayer that is supposed to be said for the dead, and then reverently putting them in a casket made out of a natural material, not any artificial material, because supposed to the ground and disintegrate with the ground. The Baha'is don't burn the body, because Abdul Baha teaches that this is not good for the atmosphere, for the nature, but so gradual disintegration is the way. So anyway, but they will not let that. And the Baha'i cemetery in Iran, where my father was buried, it's beautiful. It was called a rose garden. It was full of beautiful trees and gardens and beautiful stones and everything. You would like to go there. It was just reading all the stones. I used to go as a kid and Baha'i hidden words in them. But now the government is absolutely showing its wrath and anger and prejudice in subjecting the people who die into being thrown in places with a mass grave or something like that. And Baha'is are so torn. At the same one time, they're supposed to be obedient to the government, but at the same time, this government is absolutely cruel and unjust. And so this grandmother who died, they wanted to do the same thing. And the family and the sons, they sat down and they kind of consulted, what do we do? And this is what they decided. They're going to donate the body of their mother to the science. So the university will have the body and will benefit from learning from her body. And I thought, this is what Abdul Baha taught us, that tests are stumbling blocks or stepping stones as you make them. So they put a test in front of you. You got to find how to make it a stepping stone, because you cannot become angry. But my goodness, my reverence and my respect and my awe about these children who decided to let go of the body of their mother for something more, instead of, okay, we want to bury. So never becoming bitter, never becoming angry, never becoming violent. Never the Baha'is of Iran have done that. To me, that is godlike. That's how God is. Loving under all circumstances, and teaching and guiding and being an example. So, and that I would not be able to do when I was younger, I'm sure.
Yeah. I I wrote down what I think you said, the heart that has fear in it, God cannot be in it.
Actually, exactly. Actually, I want to read to you the exact quotation. This is from Baha'u'llah. It says, "Love is a light that never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear."
Ah,
This is from Baha'u'llah, the Four Valleys. Love is a light that never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear. So, as parents, we don't want to put fear in our children's heart, but at the same time, if you look at nature, look at the powers, you're in awe. So, the fear of God to me is awe, the sense of awe which has been very present in the Baha'i writings in relation to God. It's not the kind of fear that is petty or something like that, but it's awesome.
Keyvan Guela, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your enthusiasm and really all of the, I guess, the ways of looking positively at difficult things. I think I've learned some of that from you today. So thank you for speaking with me in good faith.
Steve, thank you so much for being such a force in making these ideas, in these ways of life of all different people shared in such a wonderful venue. I appreciate it and I congratulate you.